I drafted the briefing note in collaboration with other ISET officials to generate advice for the minister. I stand by this advice, and I feel strongly that the minister's response was justified and proportionate. In summary, I was extremely naive to expect that my good faith conversations with the complainant would remain private. I never expected my remarks to be used out of context to reinforce a narrative that is not supported by independently verified facts. I was too transparent, too trusting, and I deeply regret any impact that this has had on the government, STDC, and ISET.
Good afternoon, honourable members. I'm proud of my track record leading major transformational companies that create jobs and opportunities for Canadians. I am particularly proud of my role as chair of STTC, joined by my two strong female leaders.
I was hired by the Board of Directors in June 2015 with a mandate to change. I was asked to modernize SDTC to meet the accelerating pace of innovation in Canada and globally. I was asked to make funding processes and procedures more company and client sector focused.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Mr. McConaughey, when did you learn about the whistleblower complaints? On what date?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. I believe that, I'll give you the exact date, on February 16th, it was ISET had received the confidential file from PCO.
When did you learn of the RCGT report findings?
Mr. Chair, the first working draft of the document we had requested was delivered on September 8th. And that was a hastened version that hadn't been through their quality control process because we were having internal discussions about the matter.
When was the RCGT report commissioned?
The contract was issued on March 17th.
And you hadn't seen an initial draft in May?
In May, we received an interim brief from RCGT with a draft report that frankly was not acceptable to us. It had language that was not helpful, and it was as a result of that we decided to dig deeper and conduct additional procedures.
A bit different than September, but thank you for the precision. When was the minister made aware of the RCGT findings? I do not have the date that the deputy minister communicated with the minister, but I do know that the briefing note was signed by the deputy minister on September 27th. So the deputy minister was going to brief the minister on findings imminently on June 7th. Did that happen or no?
I don't have any awareness of that.
There's a quote, so I'm going to offer a series of quotes. They're from you.
Certainly.
So this one in context is, quote, the deputy is lining up a discussion with the minister imminently to take the pulse. That was June 7th. So that didn't happen?
I don't know if it did or not. It's possible that that was an action that was being proposed at the time, but I can't speak for the deputy or the minister.
I have a quote from you. It says, it's unlikely that certain members of the board or the entire board and executives are going to be able to continue to serve, like they've kind of lost the confidence. So really, the discussion will be the mechanisms for getting them out. Close quote. Then you said, quote, the minister is going to flip out when he hears the stuff and he's going to want an extreme reaction like shut it all down. Close quote. What changed the minister's mind and gave him confidence in the board?
Well, those remarks were made in the August, early September timeframe, well before the minister had ever been briefed. As I indicated in my opening remarks, it was speculation on my part. It was inappropriate. I regret the remarks. But I do think on the notion of the minister flipping out, it is normal for any senior official to, or minister for that matter, to react strongly when we've had some findings of, through the exercise.
So I just want to take a step back for the timeline again. You said the minister was going to be briefed on June the 7th, and then...
I did not say that, sir.
The deputy is lining up a discussion with the minister imminently to take the pulse. You did say it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if it happened, though, sir.
Okay. So this is the challenge. Mm-hmm. So if we just stick to what actually happened versus what we would have preferred to have had happened, then that will match up with the recordings that we have, and then we can get to the bottom of this. Did the minister see or get a readout on the Osler report?
I don't know if he did or not, sir.
Did you?
Yes, we were provided a debrief a verbal debrief by the STDC.
Was it a whitewash?
I don't know.
Okay. You said it was? You referred to it as the, quote, Osler whitewash investigation. You went on to say, quote, they could have done it in a way that exonerated the board and scapegoated Leah, end quote. I expect you were referring to Ms. Lawrence to your left. To your right, my left. Was it the RCGT report that gave him confidence in the board that they need not be fired? Because it found that there was $48 million in suspected wrongdoing. The minister referred to this at committee as a forensic audit. It was, of course, not that. It was a fact-finding exercise, and this is why Canada's Auditor General has launched an investigation. It also found wrongdoing in a sample of only 21 projects, and it said the conflict of interest rules were not followed. Is this what gave confidence to the minister, that readout?
I'm sorry, which readout are you referring to?
Well, the RCGT report that detailed the wrongdoing and failure to follow the conflict of interest regime.
Well, Mr. Chair, our interpretation of the RCGT report is that the findings that were made do not constitute wrongdoing or misconduct.
Okay.
We had significant discussions internally as to whether or not even these issues would constitute a breach of the contribution agreement.
Well,
and frankly, it didn't even rise to that standard.
Well, it rose to the standard to get Canada's Auditor General's attention. You said it was going to be shut down and everyone would be fired, but instead, nothing was shut down and nobody was fired. As soon as it became a political problem, the tone changed very dramatically, and the minister isn't firing anyone. And then we saw that a foundation that shares the name of the chair of the board was receiving funding from the government and praise from the minister. So I'm very curious in what changed the direction, and I have one question for you. Do you believe the whistleblowers?
Quick response. Mr. Chair, those remarks that were made were speculative in nature. I believe a portion of what the whistleblowers have alleged based on the facts that have been identified in the RCGT report, and I believe that nothing was found to date that would be construed as misconduct or wrongdoing. There may be further findings in the Auditor General's examination, but I'm not privy to that.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you very much, and it's good to be back at committee. It's been quite some time. I'm a little bit out of practice. I'm going to put a series of questions to you all in a very direct way. Please know that it's not personal. Please know that if I ask to reclaim my time to move on to the next question, I'm not doing that to be rude, but our time is limited. We've had some preliminary testimony here today about the natures of conflict of interest. I think that's at the heart of some of the allegations that have been made, quite frankly, and I'd rather not talk about them hypothetically. I'd rather talk about them directly. So I'll put my questions through you, Madam Chair. As the chair of the board, how would you define a conflict of interest?
Conflict of interest is a situation where there is, an interest, an influence in terms of a direct conflict.
And so that would include kind of beneficiary, fiduciary benefits to it, or other types of benefits to decisions that are made. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
That's correct. Have you added, so I'll begin, and again, I'm going to put these questions directly to you rather than hypothetically. Are you currently the CEO of Northstar?
Enerstor, yes, I am the chair and CEO of Enerstor, yes.
And is Enerstor currently on the conflict of interest registry?
Yes, it is.
And are you listed as one of the beneficial owners of that?
Yes, I am.
And were you, at any time, was your company in receipt of funding from the fund that you also chair?
I want to make one thing very clear, Honourable Member. Contrary to erroneous reports and allegations, no project that I have an interest in has applied for funding while I've been chair of STTC.
Was it before?
It was 18 months before.
Had it received the funding prior to?
It had, in 18 months before my appointment as chair, Enerstor was funded for a project, yes.
And were there any potential votes that would have been dealing with your organization? Did it come to the board, and if so, did you?
At the time, obviously, when I was asked to be chair, I disclosed my role as CEO of Enerstore to the government, to the vetting process.
Sorry, I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to put it directly, and I'm going to ask you to answer it.
To the minister?
Excuse me, I do have the floor. Did you, at any time that you were on the board, vote on any motions that would have involved your organization, Enerstore?
No.
Okay. So you never had to recuse yourself from any decisions, funding, ongoing renewals of contracts, or anything of that nature?
No.
Okay. That suffices. Thank you.
Yep. Do you want to describe the part? You're okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good. I just wanted to put that out there because, again, allegations are made. It's important that we just directly ask the questions, that we're not using hypothetical situations, and you have the opportunity to reply in the public forum.
Can I add something to that answer?
Unfortunately, not at this moment. Do you accept the findings of the RCGT report?
I think there's a lot of errors in the RCGT report, and I'm going to ask Leah to...
Can you
Florence-
provide those in writing? That
Yes,
would be more
and we
beneficial for
have.
my testimony.
So yes, I don't have to go through the chair, pardon me. That was provided in your background.
Yeah.
The staff...
There's a pretty big discrepancy there.
Yeah, the team put together the list and we provided them, in particular related to certain reviews related to conflict of interest as well as other items.
Okay. Mr. McConaughey, is that correct? Thank you. How long was the initial fact-finding exercise process supposed to take place?
The first phase of it was contracted for approximately 8 weeks, about half of that being field work.
Okay. And forgive me if you've already testified on this. Did the RCGT and ISED sit down with the whistleblower and review the allegations?
Yes. I'm sorry, can you reframe the question? I'm not sure I quite understood.
Did you sit down with the whistleblowers, with ISED, and review the allegations?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I reviewed the extensive binder that the complainant had created, and then as I mentioned in my opening statement, had almost weekly meetings with him throughout the process.
And so you asked the whistleblowers for documents in July?
No, the documents were provided to ISED in February.
In February?
Yes.
Is ISED now continuing to ask for the documents?
I'm sorry, maybe I'm not understanding. What documents are you referring to?
From the whistleblower.
The whistleblower, ISED's involvement in this exercise came about when PCO had referred the whistleblower's documentation to us. It was a very large, approximately 345-page binder that we had received on February 16th. And after internally reviewing that material, the decision was made to launch a fact-finding exercise.
Did you speak to the deputies, the PCO, or the minister directly or indirectly between March and September?
I did not, no.
Not at all?
Not at all. Well, to the deputy minister, yes, of course. I report to the deputy minister, but I've had no engagement with the minister or his exempt staff.
What was the ISED RCGT report or PCO opinion of the Osler investigation that you said was a whitewash?
We had minimal discussions. I certainly never discussed it with in any degree of detail with PCO, but we had received the debrief from the STDC committee that had...
So what was the nature of your discussions then with ISED or RCGT?
Frankly, there was, ISED was not involved in the Osler review. We didn't have visibility into the methodology or any real details on the
Last question.
findings.
Are your reports back and forth verbal on the phone, or are they
Very
via
quick
email?
answer.
We had a Teams meeting where we were debriefed verbally by the lawyers who conducted the review at Osler.
Were the notes summarized?
Thank you, Mr. Green.
No?
Mr.
They had
McConaughey,
meetings but
thank you.
didn't summarize the notes
Ms.
and like that?
Verscheeren, I know you wanted to, we've completed our first round here. I know that there was something that you wanted to add. I'm going to give you the opportunity in a minute or less to add what you wanted to add to Mr. Green.
Yes, I wanted to, on the declaration of the project that I worked on, that Enerstore represented, it was 18 months before. I proactively disclosed my role as CEO of Enerstore to the government during the vetting, to the minister, to the department, and to STTC. I also went to the ethics commissioner because I wanted to be clear that this was something that I would be comfortable, that it would be comfortable for me to do this. And I spent 2 hours with the Ethics Commissioner. And I think that's really, so I want to be 100% clear, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
that-
I know you wanted to say something,
Thank
so I wanted to give you that opportunity. Thank you. We're going to start with our second round now. We're going to go to Mr. Cooper for 5 minutes. Mr. Cooper, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ms. Vishurin, Ms. Uri indicated that when the whistleblower submission was made, and that was in January, that it was immediately referred to the governance committee of the board. Do you serve on the governance committee?
I'll tell you, I got a call, I think, on February 3rd.
I'm just asking a very simple question. Are you a member of the governance committee?
I'm a member of the governance committee, but I was certainly not involved in any discussion on this issue with the governance committee.
Did you? So you recused yourself?
Absolutely. I was asked not to attend. Okay, and the special committee was struck.
And Ms. Lawrence, were you involved in any discussions with the governance committee with respect to the whistleblower complaint?
I was not.
Okay. Ms. Vishurin, through you, Mr. Chair, you indicated that there was one allotment of funding from SDTC to an interest that you had. And you had indicated that you went through to the Ethics Commissioner, you alerted the Minister, and so on. There are follow-up reviews of investments, are there not?
There is, I think Ms. Uri can explain this, how it works.
Sure. Projects undergo ongoing monitoring throughout the term of the project. It's often the projects that are funded by our program last from anywhere to 3 to 5 years, and the projects are monitored on a milestone basis. We have regular check-ins with the companies, and there is required reporting on a regular basis as they work through their work.
And those follow-up reviews would be undertaken by the board, would they?
As the project goes through the regular monitoring process, no, the board does not undertake those reviews. Those reviews are undertaken by SDTC staff.
So, Ms. Vishurin, you had no involvement whatsoever in the follow-up reviews?
Not.
Okay. Thank you for that. You are the CEO of EnerStar, is that correct?
EnerStore.
EnerStores, I apologize. And you had indicated that EnerStore did not receive funding from SDTC since you have been appointed chair. Is that correct?
I think are you referring to the COVID application?
I'll be specific. That company, EnerStore, received $106,000 in so-called COVID relief payments in 2020 and another $111,000 the following year in 2021. So that is inconsistent with what you had previously stated. Your company, in which you were the CEO and are the CEO of, received almost $220,000 from SDTC, approved by the board.
Honourable member, at the time of the board decision on those COVID payments, you recall it's March 2020. It was very difficult. We were very afraid that we were going to lose the investments that we made and the jobs.
Ms. Vishurin,
so the board sought...
Ms. Vishurin, I just asked you to confirm that money went out the door, nearly $220,000 to your company in 2020 and 21. $220,000, correct?
The board sought legal advice on how best to proceed during the COVID payments.
And you moved the motion to funnel that money out the door, didn't you?
Because funding went to existing portfolio companies, where conflicts were previously declared, so they were declared, and because no company received preferential treatment, the legal opinion
No money received preferential treatment. Your company received preferential treatment in the sense that you sat on the board and provided money to it that the RGCT report flagged as likely not complying with the contribution agreement.
Legal opinion
from who?
Was then received with no conflicts needed
Who
to be
provided the legal opinion?
Osler's.
Osler. And was Mr. Van Veen involved in providing that advice? Vandenberg, rather?
Yes.
He was.
Yes.
And he's he serves as on the council, does he not?
He's a member.
He's a member of the council.
Yeah, not on the board of directors.
And he was involved in providing that advice.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Incredible.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. We have
Ms. Verschuren, I have a problem with the discrepancies between the questions that I asked you and the answers you gave Mr. Cooper. I asked you if in your official capacity you acted in a way that would have furthered the interests of your organization. You said that that happened 18 months prior, and yet the conversation around the COVID funding happened in 2020 and 2021. Under your own board governance definitions of a conflict of interest, it arises when a person exercises an official power, duty, or function that provides an opportunity to further their own private interests. Would you not agree that over $200,000 of COVID funding furthers your own private interest?
The board considered the
I asked you a very direct question. I need a very direct answer. For you, do you not consider that by moving a motion to provide $200,000 worth of funding to an organization that you were the CEO of does not constitute, at the very least, a perceived conflict of interest, if not a very real one?
The COVID payments were made as a portfolio of companies. They were made, all the conflicts were assumed previously declared.
Did you receive an ethics commissioner approval for this? You did it when you came to the board.
Yes.
But I didn't hear you say that you did that on this particular vote. Why not?
Again, we took the position that these COVID payments were broad. It was an operational issue.
The lawyer who is also a member of your council took that position. Could you not appreciate why that the perception to the public, the taxpayers who are watching this, hearing the discrepancies in that line of reasoning, would see that as a problem?
You know, the minutes of March 20th board meeting demonstrated and showed this.
Did you recuse yourself from that vote on the COVID funding, or did you move the motion?
I believe I moved the motion.
You didn't recuse yourself.
It wasn't.
Do you
positioned
regret
that
the
way.
decision not to recuse yourself from that decision?
I took the advice of my lawyer.
The lawyer who's a member of the council of the organization that you belong to?
I took the advice from Osler.
Why no ethics commissioner? That would have cleared you right here today. But right now, I got to tell you, somebody came into this fairly objective. This raises more questions than it does answer. I put very specific questions to you. You made it appear as though you did not act in the interest of your organization after you joined the board. That we now know to not be true.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you. Okay, before we begin with Mr. Brock, I just need clarification from Ms. Damoff. Ms. Damoff, you said that you received documents last evening. Which documents were you referring to?
The Osler report?
Yeah, we received that at 8:18 last night, I believe.
Okay.
So you would have received that, but you made reference to a letter that came from SDTC officials.
I thought it was included with the Osler report was included with that,
that came in at
Chair.
3:47 on Friday and was distributed at 5:15 on Friday.
That was my error. I
Yeah,
just find even getting the Osler report so late, it makes it really hard for us before committee. It's not
We
directed
received
at
it
you,
last
Chair.
night at
No,
8:18.
I'm not directing that at you.
Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Brock.
Actually, Chair, on that particular point, was that Osler report shared with the Conservative team? 'Cause I haven't seen it.
Okay, it should have been,
It was distributed to everybody.
yeah, it would have been in the committee's digital binder. I mean, I have a copy of it as well, Mr. Brock, so
Okay.
it probably was distributed into the committee's binder and sent by email to everyone at,
To all members.
yeah, it was distributed to all members. Yeah. Okay?
Okay.
Mr. Brock, go ahead. You have five.
Mr. Gourd.
Monsieur Gould, pour 5 minutes. Allez-y.
You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. My question has to do with a fund by SDTC. And there are no requirements for a report. Is that true?
translation. No requirements for reporting, is that the question?
Le fonds d'amorçage.
The seed funding doesn't require a report. Is that true?
No, it's not true. Ms. Urey can provide further information for you.
So our seed funding stream is similar to the other streams of funding that we provide, and they're subject to the same terms as conditions as required in our contribution agreement. So the seed funding stream is required to report at the end of their project on the project results, as well as the eligible costs that were incurred and the funding received to complete the project.
Merci. Le fonds prévoit.
Thank you. And that's from 50 to 500,000 given to a seed fund, and that went from 2019 to 2022. 180 projects were funded for a total of $17 million, an average of $97,000. So all who applied received the maximum of 100,000, correct?
No, all who applied did not receive the maximum of 100,000. There's varying amounts, but generally most projects that come in will be eligible for $100,000. That's the maximum contribution that's available in the seed funding stream.
180 projects were funded. Would you be able to repeat that question, please?
Que vous pouvez donner au comité, peut-être pas aujourd'hui.
Perhaps not today. Can you come back with the number of projects, the seeding projects? Because we have the number of projects that were approved, but how many people participated? If we could have that list of the 180 projects and companies that received funding.
Sure. Our funding is available publicly on our website, so it's available currently on our website, but we can also table that list with the committee for all the projects that receive funding under the seed funding stream.
And maybe if I could just add for the honourable member, so the seed funding is actually by nomination by over 80 accelerators across the country. So what we do is we work to have a network throughout the region so that we can help be aided by people locally to put it forward. And so, in fact, there are more people nominated.
J'ai une autre question.
Apologies, I have another question. Did the projects that were approved go through the board? Was there a team that recommended them to the board, or was it done internally? Because it's not a big fund. Were all projects approved by the board?
All funded projects are approved by both. Well, they're recommended by the project review committee and then subject to approval by the board before any funding is available for all of our projects. They're reviewed by internally by SDTC for eligibility on whether they meet the terms and conditions of our contribution agreement for funding, but they're also subject to an external third-party review. We have engaged partners that have expertise in perhaps the technology, finance, business, and
c'est pas ma question.
Apologies, that's not my question. My question is, were the projects approved by the board? Were all projects approved by the board?
Require board approval, yes.
Merci. Est-ce que vous avez pris toutes les précautions nécessaires?
Did you take all of the necessary precautions to ensure that there wasn't any nepotism? I.e. that family members of the board could send in their application to that seed funding. Did you take all reasonable measures to ensure that there were no conflicts of interest?
So for our seed funding program, there's all projects are subject to the same conflict of interest policy as the rest of the kind of startup and scale-up funding that we provide. So the names of the projects as well as the accelerator partners that they're working with are provided to all board members in advance of a project review committee meeting. Board members are required to make the same conflict of interest declarations, consult the registry of conflicts, and those conflicts are discussed at the meeting. And they're
Merci. Est-ce qu'à votre mémoire, il y a eu...
Thank you. Do you remember whether or not there were board members that had to recuse themselves, leave the room for certain projects to be examined for seed funding that could be linked to board family members?
So for our seed funding stream, the process for approval is there is a number of projects that are approved together in a grouping, and it's included in our consent agenda, and the consent agenda is how the approval is evidenced. And so individual members with those conflicts, they're identified in the minutes, but they are not removed from the consent agenda.
Thank you, Chair. All right. So I'd like to ask some more questions regarding the lawyer, Mr. Vandenberg, who I understand is a partner at Osler, correct? And Mr. Vandenberg is also on the internal SDTC committee. He's a member, correct? Yes? Yes, and he was largely responsible for creating the legal opinion that your company sought after the whistleblowers made known their complaints. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes? Can I have an answer, please?
Yes.
Thank you. And it probably brings to new light, I suppose, the comments from your spokesperson, Jan Mary Bannigan, who commented to the CBC that after the investigation began, this is the investigation regarding Grant Thornton, that SDTC brought in legal counsel to conduct an internal review. She declined to say what the results of that review had been, but told CBC last month that it found nothing to substantiate the allegations. And I remark on your comments, Ms. Verscheren, that in your opening comments or in response to a question, you found the assessment, the report done by one of your own, to be very thorough, probably very objective, right? Which is very interesting because obviously the two of you, Ms. Verscheren and Ms. Lawrence, I think you really need a refresher on what conflict of interest really means. And quite frankly, Mr. Vandenberg, being a member of the Ontario Bar, certainly has responsibilities as a lawyer to understand what a conflict of interest is. Not actually an actual conflict, which this clearly is, but a perceived conflict. And in fact, he was paid for this report as well. So, to both you, Ms. Lawrence and Ms. Verscheren, how much was Mr. Vandenberg paid?
So if I could correct some assumptions there, Mr. Brock.
How much was he paid?
First of all, the Osler
Ma'am, how much was he paid?
If you would let me finish, please.
No,
I
I'm
think
asking
there's
the
some
question,
pertinent facts
ma'am.
here.
Mr. Brock asked a question, Ms. Lawrence. If
How
you could
much was
answer
he
his
paid?
question and then take some time afterwards.
I don't have that information. I think
Will
what's
you
important...
table the information as to how much he was paid?
We can do that, of course. Now, if I could correct some things that Mr. Brock said, Mr. Vandenberg had absolutely nothing to do with the Osler report. As per professional practices in legal situations like these, an independent counsel from Toronto was appointed, and they had no communications as per best practices of the profession. So the assertion that Mr.
So Ms. Lawrence, this is my time. Ms. Lawrence, this is my time. Ms. Lawrence, this is my time.
And
he is a partner at that law firm. There is a conflict of interest procedure and policy in every single law firm.
Yes, and
he should have declined that because they're not the only national firm in Canada. All right, they may have a good reputation, but they're not the only firm. So I want to know how much Osler was paid for this report. I want to know specifically what time Mr. Vandenberg put into the report. And I also want to bring to your attention Section 16 of the Canada Foundation for Sustainable Development Technology Act, which prohibits members from receiving remuneration for that type of service.
Mr. Vandenberg.
So thank you for that. I'm asking questions. I'm not asking for any editorial, ma'am. I am not. This is my time.
Provide the information
ma'am, this is my time.
As we already
I
said,
have the
Mr.
floor,
Brock.
ma'am. Ms. Lawrence, I have the floor.
Mr. Brock.
I asked the questions.
Mr. Brock, you have the floor. Ask the questions, please. Ms. Lawrence, we're try to keep it to one person talking at a time.
Understood, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Lawrence, will you table all the emails regarding your concerns about the appointment of Ms. Verscharen as the chair of the board between yourself and the ministry officials, chief of staff, PMO, and PCO, because we have evidence that you felt there was definitely a conflict of interest on her appointment. Will you table all of those emails between yourself and the government?
I did advise the chair to contact the ethics commissioner. She did that, and of course, we can make available information.
Thank you very much. I believe that's my time, Chair.
One more minute, Mr. Brock.
Oh, I have one more minute.
We're in the 6-minute
Wonderful.
round.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, I want to get into some questions for you, Mr. McConaughey, because it appears as if you really want to substantially backtrack on the captured words and phrases and sentences and paragraphs that you used in recorded conversations. That's real evidence. When you're dealing with evidence, sometimes you have allegations, sometimes you have real evidence. This is real evidence. This is your words. And when I take a look at a number of the quotes, and I don't have all the quotes, I know we're talking about several minutes, if not hours, there's no suggestion in any of the things that you're saying to the whistleblowers that qualifies your statements. And you wanted to impress upon us here at committee that these were speculations on your part. There's nothing here to say speculation. There's very clear, definite concerns that you have that this company, SDTC, was definitely
Mr.
mismanaging.
Brock, that's the minute.
Oh.
Mr. Green, 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm trying to better understand the situation going back to the COVID payments. You had referenced that there are 140 companies that were pre-revenue, I think was the term you used. Was Enerstore pre-revenue when it was approved for the original round of funding?
Absolutely. The project was pre-revenue, yeah, by many years, yes.
And it was pre-revenue in 2020 and then in 2020?
Yes.
So it had been in operations for 4 or 5 years without any revenue?
It was built over 4 or 5 years. It was a very complicated compressed air energy storage project. But
And how many employees, roughly?
About 4 or 5.
4 or 5 employees?
On the project.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the funding that you received was for the 4 or 5 employees? Do you receive a salary from Enerstore?
The money goes to the equipment and the labor.
Do you receive a salary for Enerstore?
Yes.
How much do you receive for Enerstore in compensation?
I'm not sure that is something I want to say. 120,000 the last couple of years.
Every year? So out of the 200,000, 120,000 went into your compensation?
Certainly did not. It went into the project.
Which was funded by the organization that you're now the chair of. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If I can explain
No,
how...
we don't need you to
eligible
explain.
costs-
Thank you very much. I will go on to you, Ms. Lawrence. I'm going to ask you a set of questions. Do you know somebody named Aldlyn Donnelly?
Yes, I do.
And what is your relationship with Aldlyn?
She's a person that I've known in the ecosystem for about 20 years.
Would you consider them a friend?
I would.
Were you aware of her role in Alice Ecosystem Project?
I was, and I declared it to the project review committee at the time that the Alice project came forward.
Did you recuse yourself in any conversations regarding the project?
I discussed it with the board, the project review committee. They determined that because the person was a subcontractor and because I have no voting role on the project review committee, that I could stay in the room for the conversation.
Did you involve yourself in the conversation?
Not that I recall.
You don't recall?
I don't usually, actually, the reason I say that is I don't usually engage.
So what would be the purpose of you being there if you're not going to engage?
I'm there to support my team as they present projects to the committee.
So you're supporting your team as they present a project
That's
for
correct.
somebody that you've known for 20 years
As I
to the
said, I
board.
disclosed that to the project review committee. They reviewed it.
but yet
and
just
I followed
recently
the conflict
you-
of interest practice.
Just recently, though, you testified that you believed recusal was a good best practice, and yet you didn't do it.
In this situation, there was deemed not to be a conflict that was of a material nature by the directors who are my bosses, and so I stayed in the room.
So it's the directors who decide who is in a conflict of interest?
What they do is, what we do in our process, and Ms. Yuri can provide more information if you'd like, is the declaration is made, and then, yes, the directors evaluate that declaration, perceived in this case, and make a decision on who should continue to participate in the
A
meeting.
declaration is not a reverse Uno.
I'm sorry?
A declaration is not a reverse Uno that you could put on the table and say, I declare it, therefore it doesn't exist. This was a friend of yours. And again,
And that is why I
referencing
declared it, sir.
referencing your own organization's code of conduct, it goes into very clear descriptions
And that's
about
why I declared it,
relationships.
sir.
But you still didn't recuse yourself. And
I
so,
declared it, and I followed our process. And
but you've
that's-
now, I think, acknowledged that your process had some significant gaps. I'm going to put this question to both you and Ms. Verschuren, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing it. My Dutch is not so great. You're here, right? You're at a parliamentary ethics committee. To get to this point, there has got to be some significant gaps in governance. Would you not agree?
I think that you have a series of allegations that have been shown in 2 reports to be non-substantiated. I think there are some administrative findings that have been put forward and that we're implementing them.
So how do you think you got
I can always do
here?
better. We can always do better, and that's how we're
How do you
approaching the
think,
situation.
maybe I'll ask this to Mr., how do you think you got here? I'm putting the question directly to you. How did you get here? What mistakes happened? Is this a witch hunt from somebody else? Is this an axe to grind? I'm giving you the opportunity to share with, for the good and welfare of the committee, how your organization got into this position, which is the last position an organization like yours wants to get in. You're the chair. Ultimately, you are the corporate governance and responsible for the organization. So in your opinion, how did you get here?
The 345-page submission started with the Auditor General. And so that is something we don't have access to, but we have had 2 separate independent studies that showed that there was no wrongdoing and no misconduct, but that there were areas that we need to improve, which we're doing now. That's how we got here.
Given the nature of the testimony today, I'm going to put it to you one more time. Do you regret not recusing yourself?
We took the approach of listening to what our legal advisor told us. And there were 140 companies involved in this.
Do you feel like you got good advice in retrospect?
I took the advice from our lawyer.
And I'm giving you the opportunity to have retrospect. Now you're here, your salary's been disclosed, the funding that your organization was it's a pre-revenue company for 4 or 5 years, funded by an organization that you're chairing, and you're receiving compensation. Do you not regret recusing yourself? You could say no if you don't.
I think I took the advice, I received the advice from legal advice, and I think that was the proper approach.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Mr. Verschuren. Final 2 5-minute rounds, 1 conservative, 1 liberal. Mr. Barrett for 5, go ahead.
Very quickly, Ms. Lawrence, how many projects have been funded by SDTC since 2015?
I think we'll have to get that number for you.
Okay, well,
sir.
because of all the projects that have been funded, only 21 were sampled by RCGT in their preliminary review, and nearly $40 million in suspicious payments were found. In my first exchange with you, Mr. McConaughey, you said that the first time you saw the report from RCGT was in September, but when I jogged your memory with a quote from you, recordings of you, you agreed that you first saw the findings in May. You then said that although you asserted in the recordings that we've heard that on June 7th the minister would be briefed on RCGT by the DM, that you don't know if that happened, but the minister said that he got the brief in September. I asked if you believed the whistleblowers, but what you said in May was, quote, "We said to the whistleblowers, we said we would believe you. Now there's enough evidence to say we really do believe you. That means the government is going to have to take action," close quote. The fund's still open. No one's been fired. Yes or no, sir? Was ISED of the mind at that time to clear house at SDTC? Yes or no, please?
No, they were not. That was my personal opinion.
This was a big deal to ISED. You called it a, quote, sponsorship level giveaway, close quote. Is that correct, sir? Yes or no, please?
It was an offhand remark, sir.
When discussing next steps on the findings, was there ever a point when you thought the issues at SDTC were so numerous that you would need to open a new office to deal with this issue? Yes or no, sir?
I discussed the matter with the Deputy Minister.
Thank you. That's a yes. I want to offer you a quote. You said, like, you don't want a David Johnston special rapporteur or something where people are like, oh, it's another member of the Liberal elite who's sweeping this under the rug, close quote. Quote, so we're thinking of setting up an office that would be like a new deputy minister, like reporting to the deputy or report to me. We'll see. It depends, I guess, on how the minister wants to run things, close quote. So this is the story. In May, when I said got the report findings, you were gung-ho, you were ready to fire the board, ready to fire everybody, and then open a new office, a director general and a team, and have a spokesperson, but you just didn't want it to be someone who was the Prime Minister's neighbor or a member of the Trudeau Foundation. You even called it a sponsorship-level giveaway. Then in June, after the minister was briefed, the direction and attitude completely changed. You said, quote, we'll be just amending our current contract to continue the scope of study. What a climb down. I find this incredible, sir. What did the minister say? The question is, what did the minister say in June to halt the plan that you laid out?
I had no communication with the minister throughout this exercise. It's the deputy minister's role to do this. And if I may,
I've heard your response. I don't find it credible based on the recordings that we have from you at the time. I'd like to recap a few things that have been uncovered as well. The chair of the board got $220,000 for her company, and then her salary from that company was $120,000. But this is not perceived by the chair or by SDTC to be a conflict. The president got $200,000 from a meeting for her best friend. This is unbelievable. Ms. Lawrence, can you tell the committee how much in bonuses you have received from SDTC since you've started working there?
My salary is a matter of public record. It's in our annual report, and it's
Bonuses,
approved by the
please,
Board
ma'am.
of Directors. I don't have that information. We'd have to provide it. But
You'll provide it in writing to the committee?
It's a matter of public record. It's in our annual reports.
How many versions of the RCGT report are there, Mr. McConaughey?
it's detailed in the report itself. There's a version control page. I believe it's 4 versions.
And did ISED ask for any parts of it to be removed?
No.
I have to say, it's an incredible story to hear your words today when placed against your words as this has been unfolding. I have about 35 seconds left. I'd like Mr. Brock to take it, please.
Ms. Lawrence, Mr. McConaughey is on record saying that ISED confronted you, and you admitted that when Osler did their investigation, it was raised to their attention that they weren't religiously documenting conflict of interest. You went and did the retroactive documentary, documented retroactive declarations that she should have made at the time. She didn't disavow it or anything. The grant report also confirms that this was done on the advice of the corporation's external legal counsel. This is criminality. This is fraud. This is forgery on the Canadian taxpayer. This warrants a police investigation.
Thank you, Mr. Brock.
This is staggering.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. I'm going to give you less than a minute, Ms. Lawrence, to respond to that, and then we're going to go over here. Go ahead, please. Quickly, just quickly.
Yes, this is factually untrue. This is an error in the report, and it has been noted in the materials that were given to you.
Okay, thank you.